Hello and welcome to a bonus episode of Kill James Bond. You know who we are, I hope, but just in case you don't, I am Alice Caldwell-Kelly. I'm joined as always by my friends Abigail Thorne and Devon.
Bonjour!
If you don't know who I am at this point, that's on you.
Yeah. So I've transitioned us from
Again?
Force femmed us.
Yeah, I have force femmed you because
Again?
we've been I've been making you watch movies about sad European men, and now we've gotten into the arc where I make you watch movies about sad European women. And so I picked out something that I've been saving for a long time, Jean-Luc Godard's fourth movie, Vivre. And I don't really have a favorite film because my brain doesn't work like that. But if you put a gun to my head and said, stop saying films, say one film only, it would be this, right? This would be my favorite film. And I'm really nervous about this episode because I've kind of established myself over the course of doing this podcast as Ms. Film Studies. There is a lot of film studies in this. This is a film studies ass movie, and I want to do it justice. And I don't know. There's a lot there, and I don't know if I'm equal to the task. But I'm glad that I have my two friends to help me out with this.
This is one of those movies where you watch it and you're immediately taken over by, I'm watching a movie. Here, I've got a thing going on. I need to pay full attention to this and think about what I'm being shown. And there's been a lot of writing about this film. I don't know how firmly I think I have anything new to say.
People are interested in hearing us talk about it, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was all right.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, it's banging, isn't it?
That's all right. It's kind of drags in places, but it's okay. I don't get it.
If you saw Stella Artois adverts, which I know is as a sort of northerner as Abby's way of interacting with media preeminently.
Yep.
They had this
The
thing.
standard order when I used to work in the pub was 2 pints of Stella and a Pinot Grigio with ice. That was for a couple too. That's 2 pints of Stella for one man and then a Pinot Grigio with ice for his lady friend.
These are gender roles.
You got to get the Scampi crisps as well.
Yeah. But so if you remember the ads that they put out that were taking the piss out of film genres, one of them was the French art film, the French new wave art film, where it's lots of sort of people talking to camera, black and white subtitles about their sort of ennui, right?
Yes.
That's this, right? That's a thing that exists for you to make fun of because of films like this. And this is one of the sort of originators of that. And so Vivre sa vie, to live her life, right? It's a kind of bland quotidian title. It's Godard's fourth movie. And he made it with his wife, Anna Karina. And let me just say, first and foremost, we've been talking about having 1960s woman dysphoria on this podcast. This, to me, is the sort of boss battle of 1960s woman dysphoria, because ever since I saw this, which I did at quite a young age, I have had Anna Karina dysphoria specifically. And Jean-Luc Godard and I are of one mind on this because in the course of making this movie, it is very clear that he believes that Anna Karina is the most beautiful woman in the world, and so do I. So
she's definitely up there.
I mean, that's what you want to do. If you're putting your wife in a film, you want it to be very, very clear that you are horny as shit.
Look at my hot wife.
For your
Yeah.
wife.
yes, yeah, it is absolutely Look at My Hot Wife, the movie. And there are so many close-ups. I mean, the titles start with profile, close-up, other profile of Anna Karina.
Yeah, my notes say incredible side profile, who's her surgeon. Incredible front profile, who's her surgeon.
Yes.
Incredible side profile, who's her surgeon.
I wrote down every day of my life, I show my hairdresser stills from this movie, and he still has yet to get it right.
Every day of your life.
I'm a bit of a distance from the Anna Karina love, because my notes also say she looks like a younger, cuntier version of my mum. My mum, I have photos of my mum at 19, and she does look slightly like this.
Yeah.
So imagine this woman and Sean Connery, and that you've got my parents on film.
Wow.
But this is deep Alice lore, right? Is that if you want to understand why I'm like this and also why my hair looks like this, it's because I got really into French New Wave movies. And fucking Belle and Sebastian. I was insufferable. And sort of my latter adolescence was largely the Long Blonde song Lust in the Movies. And so, yeah, it just sort of colonized a whole area of my brain. Also, the other thing I want to say about the titles is, so, because there's film studies happening, right?
Yes.
And one of the things that happens in this film is that the soundtrack sort of like shows up and then disappears again very abruptly.
Yeah, I don't really know what that was about.
We'll get to what that's about.
I have to say that I didn't. There's a lot of this that I like didn't get. Some bits I got, and that was one of the bits I didn't.
Well, I mean, a lot of it's like philosophical, so we are going to need the tube at some point.
That's fine. I've brought the tube.
Yes, I'm hoping you brought the tube.
Yeah, I got it.
I mean, if you want me to like just put the thing up front, I think the soundtrack thing is partially about a sort of broader theme of like sound and silence and language. And partially it's an example of Verfremdungseffekt, which is something that I've mentioned before. It's a kind of like Brechtian dramatic thing.
Now you're speaking my language, brackets German.
That's right. Where you sort of like deliberately alienate and remind the viewer that they're watching a film. To be like, not in a sort of Marvel fourth wall way, although it can be that, but in a way that like it sort of trips you up a bit with the sort of like artificiality of it.
Yeah, I mean, I really like it. I like that there's no soundtrack for a lot of it, because this is supposed to be just like chapters from a person's life. It's cinema verite. It's the soundtrack isn't there unless it has something specific that it wants to communicate.
Yeah,
and I like that. I like that a lot.
It's a life in 12 scenes, 12 tableaux. And we start with an epigram. Is an epigraph or an epigram when you start with it? Whatever. You start with
100% sure.
A line from Montaigne. Lend yourself to others, but give yourself to yourself. And immediately we are sort of like in the realm of the transactional, right? And the temporary. And the distinction between lending and giving, which is going to be like a theme throughout.
Yeah, I wasn't in love with this for reasons we'll get to later.
Yes, it's problematic. We can problematize this film.
Let's. But then my notes say, incredible back of the head profile. Who's a surgeon?
I'm showing this to the hairdresser. I'm like, how can you get this right? You have it from
You've
all
got
four
every angle of this
cardinal direction. Yeah, so this is Nana. She's Anna Karina. She is in a cafe breaking up with her husband, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And most of this scene is only shot, we only see the backs of their heads. Which I was it was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, why are we doing this? And I was like, oh, and this is something that happens a lot throughout the film. My thought is that like this is kind of how Nana perceives the world, as being like faceless and without sympathy, without like compassionate eyes to gaze into. We spend as much time in this film looking at the backs of people's heads as we do as their faces. And I guess that's kind of like how she feels about the world, because as we learn, she's very sad, she's very unfulfilled, she's cheated on him. And she's just like pretty fucking miserable, to be honest.
Yeah. There is one thing I want to put down that I'm going to pick up later, which is this is mostly the backs of their heads, but you do see her face in the mirror behind the bar, sort of distantly. And I will come back to that later. But yeah, I think two things happening here. First is, as you say, this is sort of like the alienation that she has, but it's also Godard kind of like trying to experiment with how you would shoot a conversation, right? Where ordinarily you would do like shot, reverse shot. And instead of doing that, he would just do the back of the head and like sort of pan across. And so much of this stuff, like the soundtrack or like, the cinematography like that, it feels wrong, and it's wrong on purpose. And this is one of the things where like, if you're watching this sort of inattentively, you think, oh, this guy's a fucking idiot. He doesn't know how to make a movie.
Yeah. Yeah, she's not in frame, dude. You got to point the camera at someone's face.
You can't see the person she's talking to, mate. You can only see her back of her head and the front of her face.
Yeah, you've only got the soundtrack keeps cutting out.
Yeah.
What's going on? Well, now, that's quite enough of that. If you want to hear the rest of this high-stakes, analytical, brain champion episode, you are going to have to go to patreon.com/killjamesbond, all one word, and sign up today for just £5 a month.